The Shepnaz Podcast begins now.
Welcome to the Shepnaz Podcast. I'm Joe, and I'm your host today. And today I have with me Pastor Natalie Kuhn, who this past Sunday was able to give us a message in our Summer Psalm series, and she focused on Psalm 13. We'll get a little bit into the discussion about why she picked that one, and also some of the insights that we can pull from it. If you haven't caught that message yet, you can go to shepnaz.org/media, where you can always find the message. And also on the mobile app, you can find resources that go along with that. We have a 5-day devotional, a group leader guide, and a parent guide that goes along with her message. So welcome in, Pastor Natalie.
Am I supposed to talk now?
You're allowed to say hi. Yeah.
Hello.
We're going to let that happen. That was kind of the point of having you here.
Yeah, I figured.
Yeah, it would get really sad and boring if it's just me talking at you about your message.
We were just talking about podcasts that don't go well, and though you didn't have really any examples, that would probably not go well.
This one will go just fine. So I guess, first of all, I've kind of talked about this with a lot of the other pastoral staff of like when Rob mentioned that, hey, what we're going to do for the summer is we're going to do the Psalms, and all of you can pick one except for you're not going to pick 23 because I'm going to do that one. That was kind of some of the foundational rules. And I know that you kind of went back and forth for a while of where you wanted to be. So kind of tell us about the journey of arriving at Psalm 13.
Yeah, well, so the Psalm 13, I focused on the theme, like the wilderness season. And I actually was not reading in Psalms or even in 1 Samuel about David. I was reading about Moses and his time after leaving Egypt, and how he was kind of deep in the wilderness, and he experiences God in the wilderness. But it was like that time of like what he was going through that kind of sparked the like, okay, I feel like this is kind of the direction. And I knew that David had also gone through a wilderness season. And so I was reading through the Psalms, like kind of focusing on Psalms of lament, and Psalm 13 stood out to me. And I just actually remember I was at the girls' Bible quiz meet up in Mount Vernon, and Brett and Drew were sitting next to me, and I'm like, I think I'm going to preach on Psalm 13. And they're like, okay, but
good for you.
Yeah. So, I continued to pray about it, and, I just didn't feel released from it. So I felt like that was okay. That's the direction I'm going to go in. So it was kind of interesting how I ended up there, but the Lord got me to where he wanted me to be.
So give us a little bit of context for Psalm 13. You've kind of alluded to the fact that it's kind of a wilderness psalm, but who's the author? Do we know? I mean, some of the Psalms we don't know who the author is. Do we know who the author is on this one?
Yeah, this does say a Psalm of David, so we know David is the author of Psalm 13. Yeah. And
kind of where is he in his life? You had mentioned that he's kind of in a wilderness season, but how did that happen? Like, is this, last week, Pastor Rob was speaking about Psalm 51, and this was after he had already been king, and he was...
Yeah, so we're before that.
So this is like the prequel.
Yeah. It's like a Star Wars thing going on.
All right, so what is going on in David's life at this time when this psalm comes about?
Yeah, so I thought it would be really interesting, right, to be like, okay, what was actually going on? And so when I started reading 1 Samuel, we see David as just this shepherd's boy, and Saul is, told by God, right, that he's no longer, the spirit has been pulled from him, right? He's not going to be king anymore. And so Samuel goes and anoints David to be the next king. And so that's a huge calling, right? And very unexpected for David. And so we kind of see him go through these, like, what I would consider God just really like doing big things. Like he defeats Goliath, and he's got like favor with the people, and, God opens doors for him to be, in Saul's like army, and he's a musician for Saul. So he's kind of like in this like I don't know. This is kind of how I was reading it, but he's received this calling and now he's very close to like that calling. It's probably how I would feel if I were him. Like, I don't really know how this all kind of plays out, but obviously the Lord's doing something and I'm getting closer to, he ends up marrying Saul's daughter. And so now he's the king's son-in-law. And so in that, we start to see Saul like kind of asking, like, what is going on with David? Because he realizes he's got a lot of favor. Like God has, is doing things in his life. And so he starts to become jealous. And so with that, we see David's circumstances start to really like change. And so while he maybe felt like he was moving in the right direction, he's now forced to flee and is like in hiding, and Saul is trying to kill him. And so I guess me putting myself in David's shoes, I would think, okay, I'm moving backwards from where I thought I was supposed to be going. And that's a big marker of like the wilderness season. So sometimes you often feel like you're in the wrong place or like, so we took a wrong turn somewhere. But really this is kind of where I get into. It's the appointed time that God, uses to kind of develop some of those deeper things, this deeper faith and our walk with him. And so, yeah, that's kind of...
recently, in fact, as recently as yesterday, and I can't say that I was doing this for show preparation because I was not, but I was actually been watching the House of David series.
I watched that a little while ago.
That's on Amazon. And let me just give a caveat right now for anybody that's listening. I know that it's not always biblically accurate. All right. And we can take issue with that. But nonetheless, I was watching it for what it is. Mm-hmm. And it was giving me thought to how this would actually play out in the eyes of David. Mm-hmm. First of all, even the whole notion of being anointed king while there's still another king.
Yeah.
So Saul was the king, but Samuel was being directed by the Lord to go ahead and anoint the next king. Mm-hmm. And maybe I haven't fully appreciated the danger that put David in, that put Samuel in, that put their whole family in. Yeah. The fact that there would be somebody walking around that was outside of the family of Saul, and like that's going to be the next king.
Yeah, there's a lot of tension there.
Well, sure. Because any earthly king would assume and hope that their heirs would be the heirs to the kingdom, not somebody else coming in and replacing them.
Yeah, Jonathan. Yeah,
right. Yeah. And so,
which is interesting because he's all for David. So
he ends dynamic. Up. They become best friends, really, in the end. But nonetheless, it does put him kind of in an awkward spot. Mm-hmm. And one of the other things that I was, as you were kind of recounting the circumstances here, I wonder how many times that the Lord has spoken something to our heart of like, Natalie, I'm going to do this through you.
100%.
And then it's like, well, and I can even see that. I could apply that to how I've seen the Lord work in your life. Like maybe that time when he was calling you to ministry and you're like, well, I'm working as an administrative assistant here at the church and I've been involved in the childcare and like, I'm kind of around it in much the same way that David was around the palace and he was around the kingdom. But like, I don't see how I'm going to get from point A to point B. Right. Like if you're telling me this is where I'm headed, but this is where I am, I don't know how the one comes from the other.
Right.
And then to make matters worse in his situation, now you come to find out that the current king is now dead set against you to the point that he wants to see you killed.
Yeah.
And so...
And is killing others. Like, I mean, this is gruesome. You
are running for your life at this point. Mm-hmm. And maybe if I were David, I would be thinking, did I hear this wrong?
Yeah.
did I?
Did Samuel make a mistake when
Right.
he?
Is this real? Because if God is really going to be doing these things in my life, then would I be going through what I'm going through right now? Am I trying to force something to happen that really was never meant to happen? Mm-hmm. I'm sure we'll get into that as we're talking about it, but there's really some things that I think we can hang on to that David was going through. So tell us a little bit about, you'd mentioned kind of Moses kind of going through this wilderness time, but you had also mentioned some others like Abraham and the Israelites as a whole, and even Jesus. So maybe if you could talk to us a little bit about that.
So it's interesting because like Moses's wilderness experience was different, although he spent quite a bit of time in the wilderness. The preparation, right, before he leads the Israelites out of
like 40 years.
And then another 40 years. You know,
that's a little bit of time.
So that's probably not an encouraging word for people listening. But so Moses has it really. I would love to actually study that a little bit more in depth, but. He encounters, right? Like he receives his big call in the wilderness. It says like he was deep in the wilderness when he, encounters the burning bush and all of that. So, but then we think about like Abraham who receives the call of God, right? Like to leave everything and to go and like where he has no idea. And that, okay, so what does that look like? So he's like kind of, we see Abraham in the tension of like, oh, I'm going to build a nation through you. You're going to he doesn't even have a child, so he's like in that time period, right? His wilderness is the trusting God. And how is this even going to come about so the wilderness, I would say a lot of the time too, is that period of when you've received a promise or a call from God and in that waiting. So you're kind of waiting for God to kind of fulfill what he has promised you. But not always. Like I said, with Moses, he was in the wilderness. So, and then same with the Israelites, right? Like they're waiting to reach the promised land. So they are, learning faithfulness and how to rely fully on God, during that time. And so it's interesting. I think there's a lot of like common things in the wilderness seasons for many. Like this, we see God working in this really big, powerful way. And then we kind of see where he kind of like draws back a bit. And so we're kind of forced to, that's where the faith is like deepened, like we have to stand on not what we see and feel, right? Like the manifest presence of God, but just knowing that God, is true to his word. So yeah, I don't know if I'm rambling now, but.
No, you're fine. Well, and one other example that you brought up was specifically about Jesus.
Oh yeah, Jesus. And, we forgot about him.
we'll get him in this conversation. Talk a little bit about his experience in the wilderness.
Yeah, so I think it's really cool that it just says like the Spirit led him into the wilderness, so it's very clear that this is an appointed time for him. And so wow, I can't imagine, I really can't imagine fasting for 40 days. He is faced with, 3 really big temptations, and all of which really like prepare him for his ministry, prove his, that he is perfect, right? That he's able to overcome these things. So, he triumphs through his wilderness, but he also, we know that was a struggle for him. So we could take a lot from Jesus in the wilderness for sure.
Well, and one of the things that I found interesting in kind of making the comparison and contrast, a lot of the Old Testament examples that we were looking at, they were kind of forced into the wilderness where, literally David, his life is at risk. He has to flee to stay alive.
Yeah.
With Moses, there were similar circumstances where he had actually committed a murder and people were pursuing him because of that. So he fled and found himself in the wilderness. And, but with Jesus, as you mentioned, it was the Spirit leading him. And sometimes maybe as believers, that doesn't feel too comfortable. The idea that the Spirit would lead me into this time of
difficulty,
challenge and testing. And so how is it that we have, what we say is a God of love and who cares about us would put us in that position where, okay, you're going to spend some time in the wilderness?
Yeah. I mean, it is. It's a hard thing to wrap your mind around, I think, too, because, I'm just thinking back to when I first accepted Christ. I'm going to stay here. Everything is just so, things are changing and I'm on fire for the Lord and I'm so excited, but then to think the Lord's going to allow me to walk through trials and it's going to be fine. It's just a hard jump. It was a hard jump for me. And I had done a study about the wilderness season. So that was very encouraging for me. But yeah, to think that the Spirit would lead us into something like that, I think it goes to show that, love is not about our feelings and it's not about being comfortable, but God wants the very best for us. So what is that going to look like? It's not always we get to stay, we get to lean into God instead of our flesh, So yeah, the wilderness season is, I definitely talk about this, but it's not something we seek out. It's not something we can even orchestrate, but it's something that we shouldn't fight against and allow the Lord to do the work that he has to do in us, to get us to the calling, because we really can't just, that's another, I don't know if I'm skipping ahead, but we can't really just, that calling, that purpose that he has for us, if we don't go through the preparation, if we don't allow him to do the work within us, David was not going to be the king that he became, if he had not gone through the things that he had gone through. And same for Jesus. One of the things that I had talked about was that he is, he's merciful, our merciful high priest. And, he's able to empathize with us and relate to us and our weaknesses because of some of the things that he faced in his wilderness. So it prepared him for his ministry in that way.
Well, I think we're going to leave it there for today. We might be finding that you're at a point that you feel like you're in the wilderness right now. And we want you to know that if you are, that you're not alone, that you're there because the Lord needs to walk you through something just as he was walking David through something. And also we're willing to walk through that with you as well. You can always email podcast@shepnaz.org to let us know if there's something that you need some help with or prayer for. You can also check out everything that's going on at church by going to shepnaz.org. For Pastor Natalie, I'm Joe. Have a great day. This podcast is a production of the Shepherd Church of the Nazarene, Gahanna, Ohio. Email to podcast@shepnaz.org and let us know what you think.